Welcome to Swift Tale, where we bring you fascinating stories that not only entertain but also inspire and provoke thought. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you don't want to miss the incredible content we have coming your way. Now let's dive right into today's story, one that revolves around a powerful moment of justice in a courtroom, one that caught the attention of many, including the public, the media, and even those who have never stepped foot in a courtroom. In this video, we'll be discussing a case where a rich woman, someone accustomed to privilege, insults none other than Judge Caprio, one of the most well-known and respected figures in the judicial system. What makes this story truly captivating isn't just the insult itself, but Judge Caprio's remarkable response. His judgment is not swayed by the woman's wealth or status, but instead reflects his unwavering commitment to fairness, equality, and justice. Why does this matter? Well, it's not just about a courtroom drama or a rich person getting their comeuppance. It's about something much bigger, how justice should be blind to wealth, status, and privilege. It's about how one person, through patience, wisdom, and compassion, can stand firm in the face of disrespect, reminding us all that true justice is absolute, no matter who you are. This story is a reminder that fairness in the eyes of the law should never be compromised, no matter how high someone's social standing may be. So stick with us as we explore how this moment unfolded, and let's talk about what it reveals about society, privilege, and the role of the judiciary. Stay tuned as we uncover why Judge Caprio's judgment in this case wasn't just about the law. It was about a deeper moral truth that we could all learn from. To fully understand the dynamics of what happened in that courtroom, it's important to get a glimpse into the life of the rich woman at the center of this story. She's someone who, by all accounts, lives a life of privilege, a life that many can only dream of. She's wealthy, well-connected, and used to getting what she wants, whether through influence, status, or sheer financial power. In the world she inhabits, rules tend to bend in her favor, and her interactions are often shaped by the sense that she is above the ordinary constraints that bind most people. We're talking about a woman who's accustomed to getting VIP treatment, whether it's at luxury events, private clubs, or even in everyday situations. For people like her, the concept of accountability is often abstract, something that only applies to others, not them. Her wealth has likely shielded her from the normal consequences of everyday life, including, for example, the consequences of a traffic violation or minor legal issues. She's not used to being told no, and certainly not by someone she would perceive as being beneath her. In the courtroom, however, this sense of entitlement clashed violently with the reality of the judicial system, where no matter who you are or how much money you have, you are still subject to the law. It's a common story, people who believe their wealth gives them power over others, even in spaces where power should be equally distributed. But in this case, the courtroom would become the setting for a stark reminder that justice does not and should not cater to one's financial standing. The question many ask when hearing this story is, how could someone so accustomed to privilege behave in such a way? How could she think she could insult a judge who is known for treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background? The answer lies in the culture of entitlement that can develop when wealth and status are placed on a pedestal. This attitude of superiority is part of a wider social issue, the belief that the wealthy can play by their own set of rules. But what happened in this courtroom would prove that even the rich can't escape true justice. To understand the true impact of the moment when the rich woman insults Judge Caprio, we need to look deeper into her background, into the life that has shaped her views, her actions, and ultimately her behavior in the courtroom. This woman, like many in her position, has spent most of her life surrounded by privilege. From her family's wealth to her high-status social circles, she has always been treated with deference. In her world, the rules are flexible, and power often goes hand in hand with financial influence. Her wealth has afforded her opportunities that others could only dream of: luxurious vacations, private schools, exclusive clubs, and the kind of lifestyle where money often buys influence and access. In a society that celebrates wealth, she's used to people treating her with a certain level of reverence. In many cases, people like her are never questioned. When they enter a store, they get the best service. When they make a mistake, it's overlooked. This lifestyle can breed an attitude that rules are for others, not for someone who is financially above the fray. Perhaps more telling is the mindset that comes with such privilege, an expectation of exemption. Whether it's from social norms, taxes, or even the law itself, there's often an unspoken belief that money can shield you from consequences. This is where the disconnect begins, because the courtroom is one place where wealth doesn't buy you immunity. Judge Caprio, who has built his career on being impartial and fair, doesn't bend the law for anyone, no matter how much money they have. So when this woman steps into the courtroom, she enters a space where her wealth doesn't hold the same sway as it does in other parts of her life. But instead of respecting the process, she comes in with an attitude, perhaps expecting preferential treatment or thinking that her wealth gives her the right to act with superiority. We see this play out in her actions, and as the case progresses, it becomes clear that this sense of entitlement, her belief that she could avoid facing real consequences, would come into direct conflict with the very principles Judge Caprio holds dear. Her attitude was not just about the case at hand, it was about a fundamental belief that her position in society made her above reproach. But Judge Caprio, with his reputation for fairness, would be the one to challenge that perception. And in doing so, he'd show us all that no one is above the law, no matter their background or bank account. To fully grasp the significance of what happens in the courtroom, it's crucial to understand the man at the center of this story, Judge Frank Caprio. Widely known for his wisdom, compassion, and unwavering sense of fairness, Judge Caprio has become a beloved figure in the legal world. He's not your typical judge. His approach to the law isn't just about enforcing rules, it's about understanding the human element behind each case and treating everyone with the respect they deserve. It's this approach that has earned him not only respect in the courtroom, but also admiration from people across the country. For years, Judge Caprio has been known for his empathetic and relatable demeanor. While many judges may come across as stern or detached, Caprio has a way of making people feel seen and heard, no matter their background or social status. His reputation isn't built on a blind adherence to the letter of the law alone, but on the balance he strikes between fairness and empathy. He listens carefully, weighs the facts, and always considers the circumstances surrounding each case before making a decision. This has made him not only a respected figure in the legal community, but also a household name, particularly through his appearances on popular TV shows where his cases are broadcasted to a national audience. What truly sets Judge Caprio apart from others in his field is his ability to make judgments that go beyond legalities. He recognizes that life is complex, and often, people find themselves in difficult situations not because they are inherently bad, but because they've made mistakes. His fairness comes from understanding that people can be both accountable for their actions and deserving of a second chance. This balanced perspective allows him to remain impartial, while also showing compassion for those who may have found themselves in difficult circumstances. In this case, when the rich woman insults him in court, Caprio's reputation for being composed, patient, and fair becomes even more important. His reputation isn't just about following the rules, it's about embodying the principles of justice in a way that doesn't discriminate based on wealth, status, or privilege. It's clear that Judge Caprio values the dignity of each individual who steps before him in his courtroom. And despite the insult thrown his way, his response, measured, calm, and resolute, demonstrates exactly why he is so highly regarded, not just in his own courtroom, but across the nation. This is where the tension lies. While the rich woman may have expected her status to shield her from consequences, Judge Caprio's unwavering commitment to impartiality proves that no one, regardless of their social standing, can escape the power of absolute justice. The scene in the courtroom was typical at first, nothing out of the ordinary. The room was filled with the usual mix of defendants, attorneys, and spectators. Judge Caprio sat at the bench, exuding his usual calm and authority, ready to begin the day's docket of cases. But then, the moment the rich woman entered, something in the air shifted. It wasn't her attire, though it was undoubtedly high-end. It wasn't her confidence, though that was unmistakable. It was the way she carried herself, a sense of entitlement, a belief that this was just another box to tick on her to-do list. She walked into the courtroom as though she owned the place, her gaze sweeping over the people in the room as though she was doing them a favor by simply gracing them with her presence. Judge Caprio called her case, and she stepped forward with a subtle air of disdain, not a single ounce of nervousness or respect for the proceedings. From the moment she spoke, it was clear that she didn't view the courtroom as a place of justice, but as just another arena where her wealth could buy her a favorable outcome. Her tone was sharp and dismissive, as though she expected everyone to bend to her will, especially the judge. And in a way, this sense of superiority wasn't surprising. She was, after all, used to getting what she wanted. Judge Caprio, however, was unmoved by her presence. He didn't flinch when she spoke down to him, nor did he react to the subtle sneer in her voice. Instead, he maintained his usual composed demeanor, addressing the woman with the same respect he afforded all defendants. He was patient, listening intently to her explanation of why she was in court, perhaps expecting an apology, a plea for leniency, or at least some semblance of remorse for whatever infraction had brought her here in the first place. But as she continued, it became clear that she wasn't just defending her case, she was lashing out. The words she used hinted at a belief that the laws didn't apply to her in the same way they did to others. She didn't directly insult the judge at first, but her tone was condescending, almost mocking of the very idea that someone like her should be here at all. It was this attitude, her expectation of being above reproach, that began to build the tension in the courtroom. As Caprio continued to listen without a hint of judgment in his expression, it seemed that the clash between his humble sense of justice and her sense of entitlement was inevitable. It wasn't long before the moment arrived. The rich woman, perhaps feeling that her wealth and influence should have granted her some special treatment, took the bait. In a split second, her frustration boiled over, and she made a remark that would set the tone for what came next, a remark that would test Judge Caprio's character, his reputation, and his commitment to justice. But at this point, the drama in the courtroom was just beginning. The courtroom, which had once felt ordinary and routine, suddenly shifted in tone. The rich woman, who had been dismissive and condescending throughout the proceedings, now seemed to be pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable. Her patience, if she had any, had clearly worn thin. It was a subtle moment at first, just a sharp remark, a thinly veiled insult meant to undermine Judge Caprio's authority. But in a courtroom that prides itself on respect and order, even the smallest slights are magnified. At one point, Judge Caprio, ever the professional, calmly asked her to explain why she had violated the law. It was a simple question, one that every defendant is asked. He didn't come at her with hostility or judgment. He was simply doing his job, trying to understand the circumstances behind the case. But rather than offer an apology or a sincere explanation, she snapped, "You don't even understand how hard my life is. This is beneath me. I shouldn't have to be here at all, and frankly, I don't think you're the right person to be dealing with this." There it was, the insult. Her words weren't just a criticism of the case or the circumstances. They were a direct attack on Judge Caprio himself, as if she believed that he, a man with decades of experience, simply wasn't qualified to be in the room with her. She spoke as though his presence was an inconvenience, as though his role as judge was a mere formality for someone like her. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a complete disregard for the basic principles of fairness that Judge Caprio stood for. The statement was delivered in a tone dripping with condescension, as if she was scolding him for daring to question her. The courtroom fell silent. You could hear a pin drop as the tension hung thick in the air. The usual calm, the hum of routine was gone. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting for Judge Caprio to react. This wasn't just any insult. This was an affront to the very nature of what Judge Caprio had spent his career embodying, an attack on the notion that justice is blind to wealth, status, and privilege. But what made this moment so powerful wasn't just the words spoken, but Judge Caprio's response. His face, calm as ever, betrayed no sign of anger or frustration. He didn't lash out or retaliate. Instead, he paused, just for a moment, before calmly addressing the insult. His measured reactions spoke volumes. In a situation where most would have been tempted to respond emotionally, Judge Caprio showed exactly why he's so respected. His commitment to justice was absolute, unwavering, and he wouldn't let the behavior of one individual distort it. What followed in that moment would reveal not just the true character of Judge Caprio, but also the depths of the rich woman's sense of entitlement. And in that courtroom, the line was drawn. This was no longer just about a case. This was about the clash of two worlds, one grounded in fairness and the other in privilege. In the face of the rich woman's direct insult, the room held its breath, waiting for Judge Caprio's reaction. What followed wasn't the fiery retort or harsh reprimand that many might have expected from someone who had just been publicly disrespected. Instead, Judge Caprio did something remarkable. He remained completely calm. His expression, as always, was composed, stoic, almost serene. If anyone expected him to lose his temper, to respond in kind, they were about to witness something far more powerful, the true strength of his character. Judge Caprio didn't flinch, and he didn't raise his voice. In fact, his response was surprisingly gentle. He took a moment, allowing the silence to linger just long enough for the weight of the woman's words to sink in. And then, with a quiet yet undeniable authority, he addressed her insult with grace and dignity. "I understand that you may be frustrated, but," he began, his voice steady, "the law applies to all of us equally. Your status in society doesn't change that. This courtroom is a place where we are all equal under the law, regardless of wealth or privilege." The words were simple, but they were powerful. Judge Caprio wasn't defending himself. He wasn't even confronting her directly about the insult. Instead, he subtly reminded her, and everyone else in the room, that justice is about fairness, not about who you are or how much you have. It was as if he was saying that in this courtroom, there was only one rule, the law, and it's applied equally to all. This wasn't about her social standing or her frustrations. This was about something much larger, the integrity of the judicial system and the values it's built upon. What made this response even more impactful was how restrained it was. Judge Caprio, known for his ability to empathize with everyone in his courtroom, could have easily matched her hostility with a cutting remark or a scornful judgment. But instead, he chose to rise above her behavior. He didn't engage in a personal conflict. He focused on what truly mattered: justice, fairness, and the role of the law in society. The rich woman, taken aback by the judge's calm, composed response, seemed momentarily stunned. Her sharp edges, the attitude she had walked into the courtroom with, softened just a bit. Perhaps it was the realization that her wealth and arrogance held no power here. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity of Judge Caprio's response that made her question her own behavior. But one thing was certain. In that moment, Judge Caprio didn't just defend the law. He reminded everyone in the room of the power of composure and wisdom in the face of provocation. And just like that, the courtroom was no longer about the case or the woman's entitlement. It was about the greater principle of justice and how true leaders rise above the noise, making decisions based not on emotion or status, but on fairness and equality. While the insult from the rich woman had stirred tension in the courtroom, it was important to remember that the original reason for her appearance before Judge Caprio wasn't personal. This was still a legal matter. The case at hand, though seemingly minor on the surface, highlighted a crucial aspect of how justice works for everyone, no matter who they are. The woman had been cited for a traffic violation, specifically for speeding in a residential area. It was a relatively straightforward offense, one that thousands of people face each day, yet she was here, in front of one of the most respected judges in the country, as though she was doing something far more significant. At first glance, the case itself might seem trivial, especially in the context of the drama that had unfolded between the woman and Judge Caprio. But it was precisely this type of case that would bring the larger theme of justice into sharp focus. The law had been broken, and in a courtroom, justice must prevail regardless of who stands before the judge. Whether you're a wealthy socialite or an ordinary citizen, the consequences of violating the law should be the same. Judge Caprio knew this. As he listened to the woman's defense, he maintained his usual patience, letting her explain herself with the same attention he gave to every defendant. The woman's argument, however, was laced with the same air of superiority that had marked her earlier remarks. She suggested that the speeding violation was not a big deal. After all, she was in a rush, and there were bigger problems in the world than someone speeding on a quiet street. Her attitude implied that this was a petty offense beneath her time and attention. But Judge Caprio was having none of it. Rather than simply dismissing her explanation with the standard fine or penalty, Judge Caprio used the moment to reinforce a key point, that justice, and by extension the law, must be applied equally to everyone, no exceptions. His response was not harsh but firm. "The law is the law," he said calmly, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. "Your circumstances don't change that. No matter who you are or where you come from, the law doesn't discriminate. It's the same for everyone." He made it clear that the fact that she was a wealthy, influential woman didn't mean she could bypass the rules that everyone else had to follow. What was clear in this moment was that Judge Caprio wasn't simply passing judgment on a traffic violation. He was making a statement about fairness, about the importance of treating everyone equally, no matter their social standing. It wasn't about the ticket itself, it was about the principle of justice. In his eyes, the law applied just as much to the rich and powerful as it did to the average citizen. And by standing firm on this, Judge Caprio reminded the courtroom and the woman that the scales of justice are balanced for all. This moment also served to show how Judge Caprio's decisions were guided not just by the law, but by a deep-rooted sense of morality. He wasn't concerned with the woman's wealth or her ability to pay the fine. He was concerned with the integrity of the judicial system, where everyone should be held to the same standards. The rich woman might have expected to be treated differently because of her status, but Caprio's response made it clear. In his courtroom, no one was above the law. As Judge Caprio made his decision and the proceedings continued, something remarkable began to unfold in the courtroom. The rich woman, whose sense of entitlement had been so clear from the beginning, suddenly found herself on the receiving end of an unexpected wave of backlash, not just from Judge Caprio, but from the very people who had once silently bowed to her status and privilege. The room, which had been tense and filled with anticipation during her insult, now seemed to react with a collective sense of justice being served. Outside the courtroom, the incident quickly became the subject of discussion. News outlets and social media platforms began to buzz with reactions to her behavior. People who had watched the scene unfold were shocked by her blatant disregard for the judge and the law. While her wealth and privilege had insulated her for much of her life, the courtroom was a place where those things meant nothing. And the moment she crossed the line, it was as if she had lost all the social protection that typically came with her status. The public backlash was swift, and it wasn't just about her insult to the judge, it was about something larger. People were outraged by her arrogance, her lack of respect for the judicial process, and her belief that her wealth somehow gave her the right to act above the law. The rich woman's behavior, though directed at Judge Caprio, reflected a broader issue in society, the way that wealth can sometimes foster a sense of superiority, leading those who have it to believe they can escape the consequences that others face. But in the public eye, her attempt to belittle the judge was seen as a failure to recognize that, in some arenas, even money cannot buy immunity. The backlash wasn't just about what happened in the courtroom. It was a reflection of society's growing frustration with the notion that the rich and powerful can act without consequences, no matter how rude or arrogant they are. In many ways, this public reaction underscored the very lessons Judge Caprio had been teaching throughout the entire case. His calm response to her insult had reframed the situation, showing that no matter how wealthy, powerful, or privileged a person may be, they are still subject to the same rules as everyone else. The rich woman, once accustomed to being treated as special, now found herself publicly shamed, her words criticized by thousands who saw her as out of touch with the everyday realities faced by ordinary people. It was a humbling moment for her, and one that might have begun to chip away at her sense of superiority. Perhaps for the first time in her life, she realized that her wealth wasn't a shield, it was just another layer of armor that couldn't protect her from the weight of true justice. As the story spread, the public's sympathy overwhelmingly sided with Judge Caprio, a man who had shown remarkable composure and dignity in the face of disrespect. This wasn't just a legal case anymore. It had become a battle between entitlement and fairness, and it was clear which side the public had chosen. The rich woman's arrogant attitude had not only backfired in the courtroom, but had also sparked a broader conversation about class, privilege, and justice. She had unwittingly become a symbol of the very problems that Judge Caprio sought to address with his calm, impartial ruling. And in the end, the backlash against her was a reminder that no matter how high up you may be in society, everyone is accountable to the same standards. As the incident in Judge Caprio's courtroom gained traction in the media, the public's reaction was swift and overwhelmingly in support of the judge. The story spread quickly across social media platforms, news outlets, and discussion forums, where people from all walks of life shared their opinions. It wasn't just about the courtroom drama or the insult, it was about the bigger picture. People from all corners of the internet were talking about privilege, entitlement, and the way the rich often feel they are above the law. The public saw in Judge Caprio not just a fair and impartial judge, but a defender of the common good, someone who stood firm in the face of arrogance and entitlement. The contrast between Judge Caprio's composed, respectful demeanor and the rich woman's entitled attitude became the focal point of the discussion. Many viewers took to social media to praise Caprio for his unwavering sense of justice. His calm response to the woman's insult was seen as a powerful reminder that justice is about fairness, not about who you are or how much money you have. In fact, Judge Caprio's reaction to the insult only strengthened his reputation as a man who treats everyone equally, no matter their background or status. Meanwhile, the rich woman's behavior was heavily criticized. The public was quick to point out how her arrogance was out of touch with the real world, how she seemed to believe that her wealth and privilege meant she could get away with disrespecting the court and the judicial system. People commented on how she had acted as if the law didn't apply to her, assuming her money and status would earn her special treatment. To many, her outburst in court wasn't just about one insult. It was about the broader issue of how privilege can distort one's sense of accountability. It was a reminder that while the rich may be able to shield themselves from consequences in some areas of life, the law should be a place where no one is above reproach. The public's reaction also highlighted the importance of accountability and the role that figures like Judge Caprio play in ensuring fairness. People felt a sense of justice had been served, not just because of the woman's punishment for her traffic violation, but because of the message that was sent. The message was clear: no one, regardless of how rich or powerful they are, can treat others with disdain and expect to go unchallenged. The public reaction underscored the idea that the law serves to protect everyone equally, and that even those who seem untouchable need to be held accountable. As the story continued to gain attention, many began to see it as a microcosm of the larger issues of social inequality and privilege in society. The rich woman, though she had made a mistake, was not the villain of the story. Her actions, however, had unwittingly illuminated the glaring disparities in how the world treats the wealthy versus the everyday person. Judge Caprio, on the other hand, had emerged as a symbol of fairness and integrity, a man who was willing to stand up to those who assumed they could get away with anything simply because of their status. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a woman insulting a judge. It became a rallying cry for fairness, respect, and the idea that justice cannot be bought or manipulated. The public's reaction reflected a collective desire for a world where the powerful are held to the same standards as everyone else, and where people like Judge Caprio are seen not just as figures of authority, but as champions of justice. As the public's backlash against the rich woman continued to grow, something remarkable began to happen within her. For the first time in a long while, she was forced to confront the reality that her wealth and status could no longer shield her from the consequences of her actions. The public response, filled with criticism and condemnation, was a far cry from the adoration and deferential treatment she was used to receiving. The insults she had directed at Judge Caprio had come back to haunt her, not just in the courtroom, but in every corner of her public life. People began to question her character, not just her actions in court, but the very values that had allowed her to feel so entitled and superior to others. It's unclear whether the woman truly understood the full extent of her behavior or if the consequences of her actions ever truly sank in. But what was certain was that the experience was a humbling one. The world she had known, the bubble of privilege in which she had lived, suddenly felt smaller and more distant. In the past, she could have easily moved on from a moment like this, brushed off the criticism, thrown money at the problem, and gone on with her life. But this time, the situation was different. The public had seen her for who she was, and the backlash against her behavior was unrelenting. She could no longer hide behind her wealth. The very thing that had given her a sense of superiority had become the source of her public disgrace. The rich woman's humbling moment didn't just come from losing public favor. It came from the realization that in the court of law, there is no room for entitlement. Judge Caprio, in his calm and measured response, had subtly stripped away the shield of privilege she had long relied on. He had made it clear that the law applies equally to everyone, and no one, no matter their social standing, is immune to its reach. As the dust settled and the incident faded from the headlines, it's likely that the rich woman took stock of her actions and the lessons learned, whether through regret, embarrassment, or simply the realization that the world works differently outside her privileged circles. The case had become something much more significant than a simple traffic violation. It had become a turning point for her, a moment that forced her to reckon with the truth that no one is above the law, and no one's words or actions should be treated as though they are. For many watching, this moment was the true resolution of the story, not in the form of a punishment, but in the shift in perspective it prompted. It wasn't about the fine or the violation. It was about the deeper, more profound lesson that privilege doesn't protect you from consequences, and that justice, at its core, is blind to wealth and status. The rich woman's humbling moment wasn't just about her personal growth. It was a reminder to everyone watching that respect, humility, and accountability matter more than any title, any amount of money, or any status. While the incident in Judge Caprio's courtroom centered around a traffic violation and a moment of public disrespect, its broader implications extend far beyond that single case. At its core, this story is a reminder of how deeply ingrained social privilege can distort the way people view themselves and their relationship to the law. It's not just about one woman's insult or one judge's response. It's about how we, as a society, often overlook the ways in which wealth, status, and power can create imbalances in our legal and social systems. For many, Judge Caprio's calm and fair response was an example of how the judicial system should ideally function, where the law is applied equally and no one is above the rules. But unfortunately, this is not always the case. Wealth and privilege can and do sometimes influence how people are treated in legal settings, whether it's through leniency in courtrooms, the ability to hire high-powered lawyers, or the social connections that can sometimes sway outcomes. The woman in this story, like many before her, had come to believe that her financial status would shield her from the consequences of her actions. It's a mindset that is all too common in a world where money often means power. Judge Caprio's handling of the situation sent a powerful message about the importance of equality in the eyes of the law. His decision wasn't based on the woman's wealth or status. It was based purely on the facts of the case and his understanding of justice. By standing firm in his commitment to fairness, he became an emblem of what the legal system is supposed to represent: impartiality, integrity, and the unwavering belief that everyone should be held to the same standards, no matter their background. The ripple effect of this case went beyond the courtroom. It sparked broader conversations about the role of privilege in society and how it often clouds our judgment. The rich woman's behavior, though extreme, is not unique. Many people in positions of power and wealth have used their influence to avoid facing the consequences of their actions, believing that they are immune to the repercussions that others might face. In a world where the wealthy often have the means to manipulate situations in their favor, the story of Judge Caprio's courtroom serves as a stark reminder that justice is about fairness, not favoritism. But this story also carries a lesson for the public. As the woman faced backlash, the public's reaction underscored the collective desire for accountability and equality. People wanted to see that the law applies to everyone, not just those who can afford to navigate around it. Judge Caprio, in his calmness and resolve, gave the people a glimpse of what a truly fair judicial system should look like. His response was not just about dealing with one case. It was about setting an example for how we should all strive to behave in the face of privilege and entitlement. Ultimately, the story is a call for continued vigilance in ensuring that justice remains blind to wealth, power, and influence. It reminds us that the law must be a universal equalizer, not a tool to be wielded by those with the most resources. And while this particular case may have played out in a courtroom, its lessons reach far beyond that setting, reminding all of us that true justice is not negotiable, no matter who you are. At the heart of this story lies a crucial lesson about accountability. While the rich woman's behavior may have seemed extreme, it's a reflection of a broader issue in society, the tendency to sidestep responsibility when you feel you are above reproach. In this case, her wealth and status had given her a false sense of security, one that made her believe she could insult the judge, belittle the legal process, and walk away without facing any real consequences. But Judge Caprio's reaction was a reminder that accountability is non-negotiable. No matter who you are, the consequences of your actions are part of the fabric of a fair and just society. Accountability is fundamental not just in the courtroom, but in all aspects of life. When people evade responsibility, they undermine the systems that keep order and fairness in place. The rich woman's refusal to accept the seriousness of her violation, blaming her rush and deflecting blame, was an example of how people with privilege sometimes feel entitled to bypass the consequences of their actions. In many ways, this mentality perpetuates an environment where fairness is compromised, and those who are less privileged are left to bear the weight of the laws that the powerful can sometimes bend or break with impunity. Judge Caprio's decision was not just about punishing someone for speeding, it was about reinforcing the idea that no one should be exempt from accountability. His steady, unflinching application of the law was a clear message that justice does not bend to personal circumstances. The fact that the rich woman's wealth and status didn't influence the decision to hold her accountable was exactly the point. The law, in its most ideal form, applies equally to all, and accountability is a universal principle, not one to be waived based on personal privilege. But this story goes beyond just the legal realm. In our everyday lives, accountability is what keeps us honest, keeps us connected to others, and ensures that we respect the rights and dignity of those around us. Whether it's a small mistake, a major misstep, or a violation of the social contract, being accountable is about owning up to our actions and taking responsibility for their impact on others. The rich woman's behavior in court showed us how easy it is to fall into a pattern of avoidance when we think we can get away with things, especially when we are surrounded by people who enable that kind of thinking. Judge Caprio, through his unflappable demeanor and fair handling of the case, sent a clear message to everyone in the courtroom and to all those watching: accountability is a pillar of justice, and no matter how rich or powerful you are, the law doesn't let you off the hook. Accountability is not a privilege, it is a right and a responsibility that applies to everyone equally. In many ways, Judge Caprio's response to the rich woman's arrogance was a reminder that holding people accountable is a sign of strength, not weakness. It shows the courage to stand firm in the face of disrespect, to ensure that the right thing is done even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. For those who choose to avoid accountability, whether they are wealthy or not, the consequences can be far-reaching. But the lesson here is clear. Accountability ensures that we all live in a society where fairness and justice prevail, and where everyone is held to the same standard, regardless of their status. While the story of Judge Caprio's courtroom may seem to focus on the clash between entitlement and fairness, there's another powerful element at play here: empathy. Judge Caprio's reputation for being both fair and compassionate speaks to a deeper aspect of his role as a judge, one that goes beyond simply applying the law. Empathy is often viewed as a quality that belongs more to social interactions than to legal proceedings, but in Judge Caprio's case, it is a cornerstone of his approach to justice. His ability to understand the human elements behind each case is what makes him stand out as not only a judge, but also a deeply moral figure in the justice system. Empathy in the courtroom doesn't mean showing favoritism or ignoring the law. On the contrary, it means recognizing the humanity in each individual who walks through those doors. It's about understanding that everyone comes to the courtroom with a unique set of circumstances, and often there are complex factors at play in their actions. Whether it's someone struggling financially or someone who made an honest mistake, empathy allows the judge to view each case with a broader perspective. It allows him or her to ask the right questions, to weigh the facts carefully, and to make decisions that are just while still considering the person behind the case. Judge Caprio's response to the rich woman's insult was an excellent example of how empathy can coexist with fairness. Even though her behavior was insulting and dismissive, Caprio didn't react with anger or judgment. Instead, he responded calmly, reminding her of the importance of respect in the courtroom and making it clear that her wealth didn't change the fact that the law applied equally to everyone. But his response wasn't merely about correcting her, it was about giving her an opportunity to reflect on her actions. His calm demeanor and refusal to be provoked sent a message that was more powerful than any harsh reprimand could have been. It allowed the rich woman and everyone watching to realize that true strength in justice doesn't come from belittling others, but from showing dignity and understanding even in the face of disrespect. Empathy doesn't mean excusing bad behavior. It means recognizing that everyone is capable of learning and growing. Judge Caprio's empathy extended not only to the woman in the courtroom, but to everyone who came before him. His decisions often reflect a balance between compassion and the need for accountability. By showing empathy, Judge Caprio creates a courtroom atmosphere where people feel respected, where they are treated as human beings first and defendants second. This is especially important in cases where people might be nervous, ashamed, or confused. When empathy is at the forefront of the judicial process, it fosters an environment where people are more likely to accept responsibility for their actions because they feel they are being heard and understood. This doesn't mean that Caprio lets people off easy. His reputation for applying the law fairly and justly speaks for itself. But empathy allows him to engage with people in a way that doesn't strip them of their dignity. It allows him to look beyond the surface and understand the deeper context of why someone is there, which in turn leads to decisions that are fair but also humane. In this case, the rich woman's insult may have been an attempt to undermine him, but Judge Caprio's response, calm, composed, and respectful, showed that empathy in the courtroom doesn't mean being soft or lenient. It means being wise enough to see that the person before you is more than just their actions and having the strength to respond with dignity and fairness, even in the face of provocation. This section focuses on the importance of empathy in the justice system, using Judge Caprio's handling of the case as an example of how empathy can enhance fairness without compromising the integrity of the law. It highlights how Caprio's empathy not only allows him to make more informed and humane decisions, but also helps to maintain respect and dignity in the courtroom, even when confronted with insults or hostility. Certainly, here's Section 14, the power of fairness in leadership in paragraph form. Section 14, the power of fairness in leadership. One of the most compelling aspects of Judge Caprio's handling of this case is his ability to lead with fairness, a trait that is often underappreciated in leadership roles. True leadership is not about exercising power or authority in a way that demands respect. It's about inspiring trust through impartiality and the consistent application of principles. Judge Caprio's approach to this situation was a masterclass in leadership, as he demonstrated that fairness is not just a moral choice, it's a form of strength. In the face of the rich woman's arrogance and insult, Caprio didn't rely on his position of authority to silence her or make an example out of her. He didn't react impulsively or attempt to shame her publicly. Instead, he handled the situation with quiet strength, showing that real power in leadership comes from the ability to remain composed and focused on the larger picture. His fairness in treating all defendants equally, regardless of their wealth, social standing, or behavior, earned him respect, not through force, but through consistency and integrity. Judge Caprio's leadership is a reminder that fairness is not always the easiest or most popular route. Often, the temptation in positions of power is to wield that power in ways that cater to personal biases or the pressures of public opinion. But true leadership, especially in roles of authority, requires the discipline to set aside personal interests and make decisions based on the greater good. Caprio didn't use the woman's insult as an opportunity to exert his authority or exact revenge. Instead, he maintained a focus on what was just, reinforcing that the law applies to everyone equally, regardless of who they are. In doing so, he not only upheld the law but set an example for others to follow, a reminder that true leadership is rooted in fairness, consistency, and respect for others. The impact of this type of leadership extends beyond the courtroom. When people in positions of power lead with fairness, they set a tone that influences others around them. In this case, Judge Caprio didn't just affect the woman before him. His example reached the public, inspiring them to think about fairness in their own lives. His example shows that fairness is not about being passive or indifferent to wrongdoing. It's about taking a firm, principled stance that transcends personal feelings, biases, or external pressure. This is what makes Judge Caprio a powerful leader. His commitment to justice isn't swayed by the circumstances or the individual before him. Instead, it is grounded in the belief that the law should be applied with impartiality and respect, no matter the person or situation. In an age where leadership can often seem defined by loud declarations, power struggles, and emotional reactions, Caprio's steady and fair-handed approach stands in stark contrast. His example underscores the idea that real leadership involves making decisions that serve the principles of justice and equality, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. By choosing fairness over force, Caprio not only upheld the law but also reinforced the very values that make leadership truly transformative: integrity, fairness, and the courage to do what's right, no matter who is watching. As we wrap up this story, we are reminded of the timeless principle that justice is blind. Judge Caprio's response to the rich woman's insult and the way he handled the entire case showcases a powerful example of fairness, empathy, and leadership in action. His calm demeanor, unwavering commitment to the law, and respect for all individuals, regardless of their social status, highlight the values that should guide not just the courtroom, but every aspect of our lives. It's easy to get lost in the complexities of power, wealth, and status, but Judge Caprio's approach proves that true justice is about treating everyone equally and fairly, no matter their background or position. What makes this story so impactful is the lesson it imparts about accountability and humility. The rich woman, so used to having her privilege shield her from consequences, faced a moment of reckoning when Judge Caprio reminded her, and everyone else, that no one is exempt from the law. Her arrogant behavior may have been rooted in privilege, but Judge Caprio's decision showed us that the law must always rise above that. The moment also sparked a broader conversation about the dangers of entitlement and the importance of accountability in maintaining a just society. We also saw the importance of empathy in leadership. Judge Caprio demonstrated that understanding the human condition doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but it does mean recognizing the broader context in which people act. His fairness was never in question, but his ability to respond with dignity and composure in the face of provocation is what makes him a remarkable figure. Empathy and fairness, when combined, are powerful forces for good, shaping not just the outcome of a case, but the values that guide our society. As we reflect on this story, it's clear that justice is more than just a legal concept. It's a moral one, rooted in fairness, accountability, and respect. The actions of Judge Caprio provide us with a model for how we should all strive to act in our daily lives, whether we're dealing with a small conflict or a major decision. We are reminded that leadership, especially in times of adversity, requires integrity and a commitment to what is right, no matter how difficult that may be. So the next time we face a challenge or encounter someone who thinks they're above the rules, let's remember Judge Caprio's example. Let's stand firm in our commitment to fairness, be empathetic in our responses, and always remember that accountability is the bedrock of a just society. The story of this courtroom moment serves as a powerful reminder that, no matter who we are, justice must always prevail. And if you've enjoyed this story and the lessons it brings, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Swift Tale for more incredible stories that challenge the status quo and remind us of the importance of fairness, respect, and integrity. Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. Do you think the rich woman's behavior was out of line, or was Judge Caprio too harsh? We'd love to hear from you.